The old quarter of Port Hillary rarely slept, but that night, the wind moved through the alleyways like a ghost with unfinished business. Street lanterns flickered against the damp fog, casting swaying shadows across cobblestone. Vendors had long since packed up their stalls, and only the occasional hum of an air taxi echoed from above. Galen Vo wasn't supposed to be walking home. Not through these alleys, not at this hour. As the founder of Solaris Venture Properties, one of the largest eco-development firms in the Northern Archipelago, he usually traveled in sleek, black vehicles, escorted by digital security. But tonight, after a surprise site visit at a remote island sanctuary, he had refused the auto shuttle. "I'll walk," he told his assistant, brushing off their concern. "I need to feel something real." He didn't know then that he would find it lying in the dark, beneath a broken street lamp. At first, he thought it was just another pile of discarded fabric, damp with ocean mist. But instinct stopped him, something about the shape. The stillness. He stepped closer. A woman. She lay curled on the cold stone, one arm tucked beneath her body, the other sprawled limply toward the gutter. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the lamplight. Wet strands of hair clung to her face. Her breathing was shallow, her lips barely moving. "Miss," he said, dropping to one knee. "Can you hear me?" A weak gasp. Her fingers twitched. Then a whisper, so soft he almost missed it. "Please. Don't take me back there." Her voice cracked with fear. Galen's chest tightened. Without another thought, he unwrapped the scarf from his neck and placed it gently around her. Then he slipped off his coat and wrapped it around her trembling frame. She was ice cold, shivering violently now that her body had begun to recognize warmth again. He pulled out his datapad and pinged his estate. "Prep the med bay." Quietly. "No press. No questions. I'm bringing someone in." Then, with surprising ease, he lifted her into his arms. She was light. Alarmingly so. Her head lolled against his shoulder. He caught a glimpse of bruises on her wrist, a small cut above her eyebrow. His jaw clenched. Whoever had left her like this hadn't just abandoned her, they'd broken her. The hovercar arrived moments later, silent and sleek. The driver opened the back door without a word. Galen ducked inside with the woman cradled in his arms. The journey back to the Solaris estate passed in a blur. When they arrived, the staff, trained, discreet, efficient, waited with wide eyes but said nothing. Galen led them inside, past glass walls and bioluminescent gardens, into the med suite. "Full diagnostics," he ordered. "But do it gently. No hospital-level probes. I want her safe, not scared." Dr. Rilo, his longtime physician, nodded. Within minutes, he was checking vitals, scanning her for fractures, and gently washing the wound on her head. "She's severely dehydrated," the doctor said. "Low blood sugar, multiple bruises, a few shallow lacerations. No internal bleeding, thankfully. Likely suffering from trauma-induced shock. Maybe memory fragmentation. Possibly even mild hypothermia. But nothing life-threatening, if she's cared for properly over the next 24 hours. Galen nodded. "She'll stay here. Give her the guest suite near the east atrium. It's quiet there." That night, Galen didn't return to his own room. Instead, he sat in the armchair near her bed, elbows on knees, watching the slow, steady rise of her chest under the soft covers. She looked young. Mid-20s, maybe. There was something delicate in the way her brow furrowed, even in sleep, as if her dreams were filled with things she wasn't ready to remember. He didn't notice the mark until hours later. She had shifted in her sleep, hair falling away from her neck. There, tucked just beneath the line of her hairline, was a tattoo. A small, nearly faded sigil. His blood went cold. He recognized it. A stylized emblem, once the crest of the Horizon Project, a now disgraced philanthropic initiative that had been used as a front for illegal resource extraction on indigenous islands. It had been backed by his former business partner turned rival, Silas Marek. Galen had distanced himself from it years ago, after exposing the truth. The fallout was brutal. Lawsuits. Investigations. Silence from the authorities. And one day, the entire project disappeared from the public eye, along with many of the workers who'd once been its face. And now, this woman, lying unconscious in his home, bore its hidden mark. A coincidence? A trap? Or was she one of the survivors? His mind spun, but his body didn't move. He just stared. There was something about her, not just the tattoo, not just the bruises, but the sheer emptiness in the way she slept. Not restful. Not peaceful. Just numb. He sat back in the chair, eyes never leaving her. Whatever storm she had fled, it had been real. And now, Somehow, it had brought her here. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if she was a threat or a victim. But one thing was certain. From the moment he found her beneath that broken lantern, nothing in Galen Beau's carefully ordered world would be the same again. The guest suite overlooked the glass gardens of the East Atrium, where bioluminescent vines curled along trellises and soft light shimmered in pools that mimicked the rhythms of the nearby sea. But the woman lying beneath the silken sheets barely registered the beauty outside. When her eyes fluttered open, it wasn't the garden she saw, it was the ornate ceiling, unfamiliar and too still. She sat up with a start. Pain pulsed at her temples, and her limbs protested the sudden movement. A glass of water sat on the nightstand beside her, condensation trailing down the sides like a clock's quiet ticking. Next to it, a folded towel and a tray of warm food, simple but fragrant, a bowl of rice porridge, fruit slices, and herbal tea. As she stared at it, the door creaked open. Galen entered. No suit today. No pretense. Just a dark button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his usual stillness. "You're awake," he said, tone neutral, but his eyes carried relief. She didn't answer at first. Her gaze flicked between him, the room, the food, and back to him. "Where am I?" "My home," he said. "Solaris Estate." She blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the name. "You were unconscious when I found you," he continued. "Near the Eastern District. It was raining. You were hurt." Silence. "I called a doctor. You're stable now, but I'd like you to stay until we're sure you've recovered." She slowly lowered herself back against the pillows, fingers twitching under the blanket. "I don't remember." "Your name?" he asked gently. A pause. "Sarah." It came out hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if it was true. "Just Sarah?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "For now." Galen didn't press further. He simply stepped closer and set the tray within her reach. "Eat what you can," he said, voice soft but firm. "Then rest. No one here will harm you." She nodded again, wary, eyes still scanning the room like there were escape routes hidden in the walls. As he left the suite, Galen exhaled. He wasn't a man easily rattled, but something about her unsettled him, not fear, exactly. A kind of gravity. As if the moment she'd said her name, something shifted in him too. For the next 3 days, Sarah barely left the room. She ate sparingly, mostly at night. She didn't ask questions, didn't make phone calls, didn't demand explanations. She accepted the staff's help with shy gratitude, but always kept her distance. Still, Galen watched her, carefully, respectfully, from afar. She was quiet. Polite. But there was something rehearsed in her stillness, like she'd spent years practicing invisibility. The only time she seemed to relax was in the solarium, where she would sit among the living walls of moss and flowering ferns, sketching in a plain notebook the staff had given her. Mrs. Leese, the estate's head of housekeeping, adored her almost instantly. She'd begun leaving fresh wildflowers by Sarah's bedside each morning. Head chef Maldo started sending small meals with personalized touches, ginger biscuits, sea salt broth, hand-folded rice parcels. Sarah never requested any of it. But she accepted it with a soft thank you, always just audible enough to hear. And slowly, she started to open tiny cracks in the wall she'd built. One morning, Galen found her in the rooftop greenhouse, sleeves rolled, fingers buried in damp soil as she helped the gardener transplant herb shoots. She turned when she sensed him watching. "I thought maybe I should help," she said quietly, brushing her hands off on her apron. "Seems better than hiding." "You don't owe anyone anything," he replied. "Not here." "But I want to," she said. "I don't want to be a shadow in someone else's house." That struck him. Because it was exactly how he'd felt in his youth, before success, before Solaris. Like a ghost surviving someone else's dream. That afternoon, he found her reading in the lounge. Sunlight caught the ends of her hair. There was color in her cheeks now. A small, unconscious smile played on her lips. He cleared his throat. She looked up. "There's something I'd like to ask," he said. Sarah tensed, nodding once. Galen stepped closer, crouching gently beside her seat. "Your tattoo." Her hand instinctively rose to the back of her neck. "I noticed it the first night," he said softly. "I recognize the symbol. I know it's from the Horizon Project." She froze. Her expression didn't change, but the warmth drained from her face. I don't remember how I got it." "Do you remember being part of the program?" She shook her head slowly. "I've tried. But it's like pieces of a dream I can't stitch together. I see flashes, heat, red soil, distant music. A name I can't hold on to. And shame." Her voice cracked on that word. Galen sat back on his heels, studying her face. "You don't need to be afraid here," he said. "But if there's something dangerous in your past, someone looking for you, I need to know." Sarah looked down at her hands. They were shaking. "I don't know who I am, Galen. Not really. But I know what it feels like to be used." That night, Galen couldn't sleep. He sat in his office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling data displays, scrolling through news archives, government records, and encrypted forums. He entered old passwords, pulled from contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. He searched for her. He found nothing. No missing persons reports. No matches on facial recognition. Not even within internal Horizon databases, at least, not any still publicly accessible. But his gut told him she wasn't lying. Whatever Sarah had fled from, she hadn't done it for profit. She had run because something had broken her trust in the world. And now, somehow, she had landed in his care. The next morning, she met him in the garden. "I know you don't believe me yet," she said softly. "I wouldn't believe me either. But I'm not a threat. I don't want to hurt you. I just want a chance to start again." He looked at her for a long time. And finally, he said the only thing he could. "Then let's start here." She smiled. It was small, hesitant, but it reached her eyes. And in that moment, though neither of them could admit it, something between them shifted again, from guardian and guest to something far more delicate. Something like trust. The rain came fast that afternoon, hammering against the glass dome of a solarium like the sky had something to prove. Galen watched from the upper balcony, one hand cradling a mug of dark herbal tea, the other resting absently against the railing. Below, Sarah sat barefoot on a woven mat, surrounded by ferns and orchid vines, her head bowed over her sketchbook. The storm didn't seem to faze her anymore. It used to, sudden noises, changes in light, unfamiliar footfalls. Her body would tense, breath catch, eyes flick instinctively toward exits. Not anymore. Not with him. Not here. But that illusion was about to shatter. At precisely 4:07 p.m., an unauthorized signal pinged the estate perimeter, an encrypted identification tag, high-level clearance, somehow bypassing the estate's outer scanners. A vehicle was approaching. Fast. "Sir," came a voice over the comm line. "We have an unscheduled visitor." They used a legacy access code from the Mark files. "One of your former partners." Galen straightened. His jaw locked. "Let me see the feed." The projection blinked to life on the balcony screen. A hovercar, sleek, black, corporate. Unmarked, but familiar. From the passenger side stepped a man in a storm gray coat. Tall, trim, hair too perfect, smile too rehearsed. Silas Marek. Once a co-founder of Solaris. Now the face behind the Horizon Project's silent rebirth under another name. Galen's voice was ice. "Don't open the gates. He's already inside, sir. Used a cloned code. He's walking toward the inner courtyard now." Galen didn't wait. He sprinted down the spiral staircase, coat flying behind him, heart pounding, not from fear, but fury. And something else. He reached the entrance just as Silas stepped onto the atrium arch. "Galen," Silas greeted with artificial warmth. "It's been too long." Galen said nothing. Silas glanced at the nearest vine-wrapped pillar and smiled faintly. "Still cultivating this place like it's sacred. I always admired that. You're trespassing. Come now. I just wanted to talk. You and I." Silas's eyes flicked toward the solarium. "We share an unresolved history." And then Galen knew. Silas wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for her. "Get to the point," Galen said tightly. "You have something, someone, who belongs to me." Galen's fingers curled into fists. "She doesn't belong to anyone." Silas clicked his tongue. "Old habits, Galen. You used to understand the value of assets." "Sarah, well, that's what she goes by now, isn't it? She was one of our best. Until she cracked." Galen's stomach churned. "She wasn't your pawn," he growled. "She was your victim." "She was a public face," Silas replied smoothly. "Trained, trusted, gifted. She believed in our vision. Until she saw too much. She saw the truth," Galen snapped. Silas's eyes narrowed. "That's her version of it." Galen stepped forward, lowering his voice but letting every word cut. "She was branded. Tracked. Silenced. Whatever you think you had on her, it's over. She's not yours to threaten. Not anymore." A beat of silence. Silas tilted his head. "Then you haven't told her?" Galen froze. "Told her what?" Silas smiled, a slow, sharp grin. That the Horizon project was never shut down. Just renamed. Relocated. And the files she stole? Worthless. We scrubbed everything clean months before she ran. She didn't run, Galen said coldly. She survived. Silas turned away, surveying the rain-slick courtyard. You really think keeping her in this glass palace will protect her? You're underestimating what I'll do to keep my work intact. Galen moved between him and the solarium door. Then overestimate me, he said. Silas stared at him, the smile fading. This isn't over, Galen. No, Galen replied, stepping closer. It's just the beginning. Silas backed away, giving a small, mocking bow. Always the noble one. Then he left. Sarah was waiting when Galen returned to the solarium. She wasn't sketching anymore. She stood in the center of the room, pale and stiff, holding her notebook like a shield. Who was that? She asked. Galen didn't lie. He told her everything. Silas. The Horizon Project. The real purpose behind the tattoo. The way Sarah had once unknowingly become the voice for something vile, and how she'd vanished before it consumed her. Her face remained unreadable throughout. Only her hands trembled. So he knows I'm here, she said finally. Yes. And he won't stop. No. She sat down slowly on the edge of the lounge chair, as if her legs no longer trusted her. I remember now, she whispered. Bits of it. The places we toured. The scripts I was told to memorize. The fake smiles for donors. The way the villages were cleaned just for filming. She looked up at Galen, tears brimming. There were children. One boy followed me around with a bucket. He thought if he worked hard enough, I'd bring him with me when we left. I gave him my bracelet. Galen knelt beside her. You did what you could. Then you left. I left too late. No, he said firmly. You left. That's what matters. Her voice dropped. But if they erased everything? If the files are gone? What can I do now? Galen stood. Walked to a cabinet. Returned with a small metal drive. I backed up the estate security footage the day you arrived, he said. Not just of you. But of everything since. The bruises. The mark. Your recovery. Your story. We make it public, not just as evidence, but as truth. She stared at the drive, hesitant. And what happens to you? She asked. Your name. Your company. Everything you've built? I built it once, he said. I can build again. But you. He took her hand, slowly, deliberately. You deserve a life that's real. Not a hiding place. Silence. Then she reached out, and closed her fingers around his. I'm tired of running, she whispered. Then stop, he said. Let them come. And for the first time, she didn't feel hunted. She felt found. The estate was quiet, unnaturally so. A storm had passed in the night, and the grounds bore its scars, fallen fronds, overturned flower pots, puddles reflecting gray skies. Inside, in Galen's private office, Sarah sat still as a statue. The only sound was the soft whir of the data terminal. The drive Galen had handed her the day before was now fully uploaded, its contents encrypted, tagged, and set to send. Dozens of video files, medical scans, and time-stamped images. A digital trail tracing the truth of her condition, of the mark, of her slow unraveling and reconstruction inside Solaris. They had added her statement last night. Raw. Unrehearsed. Recorded in one take, just as she was. Now it sat in the queue, awaiting her final approval. Galen stood by the window, silent. Waiting. Sarah hovered her fingers above the send button. Her hand trembled. I thought I'd feel brave by now, she said, voice hollow. He turned. Courage doesn't mean the fear goes away. It means you act anyway. She glanced at him. What if it doesn't matter? What if they erase this too? Then we do it again, Galen said. And again. And again. Until someone hears. A long pause. Then, without another word, Sarah pressed the button. The file transferred instantly, delivered to an alliance of independent journalists, watchdog NGOs, and international justice platforms. It was sent to inboxes across the globe, under a secure signature. No secrets. No holding back. A new storm began, this time not outside the walls, but across the world. By dawn, the world had a new headline. Whistleblower exposes Horizon Project, corporate abuse disguised as humanitarian aid. The footage was devastating. Children working barefoot behind the camera. Photoshoots staged with falsified aid deliveries. Sarah, smiling beside a man now known to be a predator in a suit. And then, her voice. Her story. Her name. Sarah Lynn, former brand ambassador, speaks out. The public's response was immediate. Furious. Divided. Some called her a hero. Others called her complicit. But what no one could call her anymore was silent. Sarah stood in the center of it all like the eye of a hurricane, calm, collected, and scared out of her mind. The backlash came for Galen, too. Calls from the Solaris board. Sponsors threatening to pull funding. Advisors urging silence. Distance yourself from her, said one. Issue a statement condemning the Horizon project but clarifying that you had no knowledge of her involvement. Another voice, colder, cut her loose or risk losing everything. Galen didn't even answer. He simply stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. That evening, he and Sarah appeared on a live broadcast, standing side by side at a small press conference hosted by the Coalition for Corporate Transparency. No logos. No handlers. No teleprompters. Just them. Galen spoke first. I've spent the last 15 years building something I thought was good. Ethical. But today, I've learned that doing good quietly is no longer enough. I stand with Sarah Lynn, not just because I care about her, but because she stood alone first, and I refuse to let her stand alone again. Then Sarah stepped forward. She was dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, her only accessory a silver pendant Galen had given her for strength. The camera lights made her pale, but she didn't falter. I believed in a lie, she said, her voice steady. But when I saw the truth, I ran. Not just to survive, but to try and make it right. This is me, standing in the light. I'm not perfect. I was part of something harmful. But now, I'm part of something healing. She looked over at Galen. And no one silences me again. The fallout was swift. Silas Marek was summoned for investigation. Private messages and financial transfers linked to Shell charities began surfacing across the media. The Horizon Project's holdings plummeted. Executives resigned. Governments that had once turned a blind eye opened overdue cases. And yet, the damage to Galen's world was real too. Solaris lost 2 major investors. A planned expansion in the Aran Islands collapsed overnight. Headlines swirled, Galen Vo's empire wavers amid whistleblower scandal. And through it all, Sarah watched with quiet guilt. I didn't want to break what you built, she said one night, curled beside Galen on the solarium sofa, her knees tucked to her chest. He looked at her, brow furrowed. You didn't break it, he said. You revealed where it was already cracked. She let her head rest against his shoulder. And what if it all falls apart? Then we build something better, he murmured. Together. They began again in the place it had started, the mountain retreat. The old Solaris prototype lodge nestled between pine-covered cliffs and a hidden lake, far from city noise and digital surveillance. There, the air tasted of wood smoke and wild mint. There, they breathed without consequence. They took in no guests, made no announcements. Just lived. For weeks, Sarah slept through the night without dreams. She painted again. Cooked simple meals. Laughed when the stove smoked. Cried when a rabbit wandered into the greenhouse and chewed through her first herb garden. And Galen watched her return to herself, not as a woman who had been broken, but as a woman who had remade herself from the ashes. They didn't talk about what came next. Not yet. They simply lived in the day. Until one morning, Galen stood on the porch holding a thin envelope. Inside was a letter from a journalist. A thank you. Attached was an early draft of a piece titled, The Woman Who Said Enough. And below it, a simple note. Because of her, a dozen others have come forward. You gave them a voice. Now the world's listening. He carried it to Sarah, who was tending to a new patch of lavender on the hill. She read it once. Then read it again. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't cry. She smiled. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life running, she said quietly. You're not running anymore, Galen replied. She reached for his hand. Then let's walk forward. Together, they turned from the lavender field and stepped down the path toward the lake. No cameras, no press, no headlines. Only the sound of birdsong, and the rhythm of 2 hearts beating towards something new. The cabin sat at the edge of the world. Nestled between mossy cliffs and a glistening lake that stretched like glass beneath the sky, it looked less like a retreat and more like a forgotten page from a fairy tale, one that never quite made it to the final print. There were no golden gates. No marble columns. Just wood, stone, and stillness. And laughter. Galen stood on the porch, holding a steaming mug of bark root tea, watching Sarah kneel by the garden bed. Her hands were buried in soil, sleeves rolled, hair tied back loosely. The morning sun caught the edge of her smile as she planted tiny wildflower seeds in careful rows. She had been at it for an hour, humming softly, barefoot in the dew-soaked grass. She's not just planting flowers, Galen thought, sipping his tea. She's planting her place in the world. It had been 6 months since the broadcast. 6 months since they walked away from everything and began to build something new. No headlines followed them here. No journalists came knocking. No threats, no lawyers. Just silence. And time. And for once, they had both. The lodge had changed. Once designed to host luxury eco-retreats for influencers and foreign dignitaries, it was now the heart of something entirely different. Quietly, with no press or PR campaign, Galen and Sarah began welcoming women from all walks of life, those who had been cast out, burned, or broken by institutions that promised safety and delivered silence. Widows. Single mothers. Former employees of toxic corporations. Survivors of exploitation. There were no forms to sign. No long interviews. Only a question: what do you need to feel like yourself again? Some said, sleep. Others said, work. Many said nothing. Just cried. And still, they stayed. Because here, in this place, healing wasn't a program, it was a partnership. Galen taught the logistics. How to run a guest house, budget supplies, restore the trail paths. He led hiking excursions with maps he drew by hand and showed them how to build self-sustaining firewood stoves from local stone. But it was Sarah who gave the lodge its soul. She taught art again, watercolors and charcoal, poetry and movement. Not from a pedestal, but from a place of shared survival. She never once used the word trauma. Instead, she used story. Tell it the way you felt it, she would say during evening circles around the fire. Not the way they told you to remember it. And they did. One woman wrote a letter she never sent. Another wrote a lullaby for the daughter she'd lost. And slowly, so slowly, their pain became something else. Not gone, but named. And therefore, no longer in control. Sarah's memoir, The Quiet Exit, released quietly and sold quietly, until it didn't. Within 3 weeks, it had gone viral not because of marketing but because women shared it with each other. Book clubs formed around it. Shelters printed passages and taped them to bathroom mirrors. A university in New Zealand made it required reading in a human rights course. But Sarah never celebrated the sales. She celebrated the letters. Handwritten notes from women she would never meet. I thought I was alone until your pages spoke the words I couldn't. You helped me name what happened. Thank you for giving me back my voice. Because of you, I stayed. She kept the letters in a chest by the fireplace. Each one folded, treasured. She read them on rainy days when the old fears crept back. One night, as frost danced on the windows and the lake froze in quiet defiance of the season, Sarah sat beside Galen in front of the hearth. They had made a habit of these evenings: blankets, tea, shared pages. He had finished the first draft of his book. Not a business memoir. Not a legacy guide. A reckoning. Sustainable by heart. A candid look at the tourism industry, the cost of greed, and the radical idea that dignity should be worth more than profit margins. He didn't want bestseller lists. He wanted truth. And like her, he didn't care about how many read it, only that the right ones did. That night, as the fire popped and hissed behind them, Sarah leaned into him, her hand resting over his heart. Do you miss it? She asked. The city. The boardroom. The empire. Galen stared into the flames for a moment. Then he shook his head slowly. I don't miss building things for people who only saw the surface, he said. But I love building this. He kissed the top of her head. You gave it meaning. They didn't call it a resort anymore. They called it the Still House. A name born from the quiet. From what remained after everything else had been stripped away. It had no billboard. No commercial. Just a word passed from one survivor to another. And slowly, it filled. Not with tourists. But with people in need of pause. Then came the spring morning when everything changed again. Sarah stood at the edge of the lake, bare feet in the soft grass, a letter clutched in her hand. The paper trembled in the wind, but her grip did not. Galen stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You're sure? He asked gently. She nodded. I want to give this child the world we never had. She turned, eyes shining, and pressed the letter into his hands. It was a proposal to turn their lodge into a foundation. Not a charity. A movement. A living space for ethical tourism, survivor employment, environmental preservation, and mental health education, all under one roof. Not for money, she said, but for meaning. Galen read the words, slowly. Then folded the letter and kissed her. I'm in. By the time summer came, the lodge was alive with stories again. Not of boardroom deals or shareholder gains, but of growth. Of people who had been stepped over finding roots again. Of a couple who found not just each other, but a cause worth building every day. One that didn't ask for power, only purpose. On the first day of their new retreat cycle, Sarah stood at the top of the stone trail, watching as a new group of women approached. She wore a simple linen dress, a journal tucked under one arm, a sun pendant around her neck. Galen stood beside her, holding her hand. Below them, laughter echoed from the lake where a child played in the water with another guest. The sky was wide and forgiving. The wind tasted of pine. And in that moment, Sarah realized something she never thought she'd feel again. Not just safety, but belonging. She turned to Galen. "We didn't choose this life," she said. "No," he replied. "We chose each other." She smiled. And that made all the difference.